Hey guys out there, and welcome to another day with PE Slick Podcast. It's your host, Ranger Matt. Thanks for sticking by this evening and for standing by for anybody that's watching or will be watching later. I got another Disney vet on. This is Don Hahn. He produced The Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, the Howard Ashman story that recently came out, and a couple of more for Disney. And I'm thrilled to have him on. I'm always happy to have somebody from Disney on, and let me bring him on.
How you doing, Matt? Hi.
Hey, Don.
Doing great. Thanks for having me on. I had my usual technical problems trying to figure out how to get on, but I'm glad to be here.
Hey, I appreciate you coming aboard, man. I've been a Disney fan for a long time. I'm more with the early years of Disney because I was born in '91. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, so I'm more with those classics. But I've seen a few of the recent ones. I still haven't seen Tangled or Frozen yet, but you know,
Well, you'll
um,
get around to it. They're out there. You can see them anytime.
yeah. I love what you did with the Howard Ashman story. It reminded me with Waking Sleep and Beauty as well. After you did Waking Sleep and Beauty, was that when you kind of had the idea to do Howard's story?
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because I was just thinking about that. I touched on Howard Ashman's story, and he was a great songwriter, but he was more than that. He was a dramatist, and he really understood storytelling, and he had his master's degree in directing for the theater, and so I always thought there was more story there to tell. But I kind of sat on it for about 5 years, and finally I thought, I'm going to try to start piecing it together. And the more research I did, and the more I looked into it, the more I thought this is a great story. It's somebody I knew and worked with, so he's a great guy. But I just thought his story was inspiring, and obviously he had a lot of struggles in his life. He was gay at a time that probably wasn't very popular to be gay. He was HIV positive and had AIDS, and eventually died from that. But through it all, he remained really committed to his work and created some really wonderful songs that you grew up on. So I thought that's a worthwhile story to tell.
Um, just out of curiosity, because right now I'm currently working on a documentary. I like how you did Howard's story, and I'm kind of trying to do it in the same way with the whole voiceover and footage.
Mm.
Um, how long did it take to make Howard's story doing that technique?
Once I got all elements together, a year or 18 months to actually put it together. The research took a while, and getting the interviews. I decided not to film interviews because I wanted to transport the audience back into the 80s and 90s when the story takes place. And if you film interviews, you're suddenly cutting from this kind of low resolution video images from that time to these really high resolution interviews, and then back again. And you really don't need that. You really need to stay there in that time. And so, so I really just did audio interviews. The other thing that did is when you're just doing audio interviews, people tend to open up a little bit more, and they tend to just talk a little bit more and be more open about their lives and what went on. So if you introduce a camera and lights and makeup and all that stuff, people start to get very guarded about what they're talking about. And so it was just a better way for people to be honest about what the story was.
Right. Yeah. When I first started doing my podcast, because this coming December, it'll be a year since I've been doing it.
Oh,
Um,
great.
when I first started doing it, it was over the phone interview, so it was audio, and I would do a slideshow of the actors' photos or clips or anything with their permissions. And there were times where I would ask them a question, and they had to think about it and say, could you maybe this is phone, so you can cut this part out. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was more comfortable that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Um, I was just curious to ask, because I love the Howard story. I got it on my phone. I got Disney Plus, and I watch it all the time. I waited for a long time to see it, and I love it. Um,
Thank you.
is there plans to maybe put it on DVD and show any deleted scenes or anything?
You know, I haven't heard of any plans just yet. There are some deleted scenes. There are on every movie, I guess. But so far, it's really just committed to being on Disney Plus. Sometimes, though, what they do on Disney Plus is they'll add deleted scenes as kind of extra material when you watch the movie, so you can go and click on other elements and see some behind the scenes thing. So one of these days, when I can recover, I'll have to go in and put together some of the material that we had. Because it's like with any story, trying to fit it into 90 minutes is difficult.
Yeah.
You want to do that because the average audience is going to be fine with 90 minutes, but they aren't going to be fine if it lasts for 4 hours. So there's always a few scenes that get cut.
Yeah. One of the things I love too, because there's a lot of scenes I love, but you edited it in Waking Sleeping Beauty and you put it in Howard, was the scene with you guys in New York, and it was Alan and Howard, and it was recording Beauty and the Beast, and the orchestra was there, and
Yeah.
I thought those clips was extremely wonderful. And watching Howard and Alan had the mullet, long hair, and it was fun times. I love watching those clips, and it was
Yeah.
yeah. What do you remember about that day when y'all was doing that?
Well, it's probably one of the reasons I wanted to put a lot of it in the movie, because it was a really memorable day. Because we had a full orchestra there, which never happens on movies. A lot of times, especially more recently on more modern movies, you'll do pieces of the orchestra. So you might do strings and then in the afternoon do percussion and that kind of stuff. But we have the whole orchestra and the singers there at the same time. So you have this kind of energy coming from that, from recording it like it was a Broadway show album. And I think that's what I remember most, is that energy of having Angela Lansbury and the orchestra and Howard and everybody. Roy Disney was there. Like the whole room is vibrating kind of. And there's pressure on one hand because you want to get the best recording you can, but on the other hand, you realize how lucky we all are to have the jobs we have, and how. And I want to show that, because it's work, but it's also it's fun what we do, and to be able to bring a lot of joy and entertainment to people is important, and something that is important to show.
Yeah, and I honestly I felt that movie really captured Howard. I mean, I knew of Howard because for me, that's probably why I made some short films in college. And now I've always watched the making of movies, and I
Yeah.
watched the making of Beauty and the Beast and the Little Mermaid, and Howard. They would talk about Howard, and I also like what you got with his younger years. You had the footage and some pictures, and I knew about Bill, but I didn't know about Stewart. I didn't know about
Mm-hmm.
that part of his life. That all that. Yeah.
I didn't either. That's the weird thing about making a documentary, is I worked with Howard, and you think, oh, I kind of know him, but you don't. You think of people you work with or friends from school or wherever, and you don't really know them. And so a lot of what I learned making the film was new to me. And it only made the story richer, because I thought the more you know about Howard as a person, know the whole person, everything about him, his relationships and his family and his sense of humor and that kind of stuff, the more you'll appreciate who he was and what his gift was. So that's the fun part about making documentaries, is you pick a subject not because you're an expert, but because you just know a little bit to be curious about it. So that's how you start.
Yeah. Before Alan and Howard joined Disney on Little Mermaid, did y'all know who they were with Little Shop? And I know Howard did Smile and Alan did Kicks. Did you know who they were before that?
I knew Little Shop of Horrors. That was a really popular stage show, Broadway musical that Howard wrote and launched in his little theater he owned. When he was in his 20s, he started a theater in Manhattan. Can you imagine doing that now? You know, here's this kid from Baltimore. He was born and raised in Baltimore and had no particular knowledge of New York and didn't really have a chance. This little Jewish kid from Baltimore. And he studies, he does his homework, and it was at a time in New York in the 70s when there was a lot of urban decay and blight, and you could rent buildings for almost no money downtown, and that's what he did. He found a building and he rented it and turned it into a theater, and that's where Little Shop came from. So I knew him. I knew of him from that. I knew his name. I didn't meet him until he did Little Mermaid, and that's when I met Howard and Alan both. And great, great guys, talented, fun to work with, demanding sometimes, complicated, but we all are. So
yeah, one of the things I love too about, now, of course, when I was younger, people would consider Little Mermaid as kind of like a girl film and not really a guy film. But one of the things I love, and what I love seeing in the movie too, and both Waken and Howard, was hearing Jodie Benson singing "Part of Your World." That song to me is one of my favorite songs of Little Mermaid. Dad and Kiss the Girl.
Yeah, those are both great songs, and Jodie's pretty interesting. She's she was in Smile on Broadway, and then when that show didn't do too well, Howard said, "Well, why don't you come out and try to do some animation at Disney?" And so she auditioned and got the role of Ariel. And she's still around. She still sings. She still sings beautifully. She lives in Atlanta now. So that again, I wanted to show that because I guess it shows how hard it is sometimes to get a performance on tape. And I think probably goes true for maybe you or a lot of your listeners, is that a lot of us are creative people that enjoy making films or enjoy doing podcasts or writing songs or whatever. And you just have to realize it's not easy. Even for the professionals that do it every day, it's hard, and it's a lot of mistakes and a lot of false starts, and that's okay. And so it was good. Like, I wanted to show that in the movie.
Yeah, and it paid off because I loved it. I know a lot of people loved it. And I also loved Waking Sleeping Beauty as well. When that came out, I had just came out of high school that year.
Yeah.
And I knew about a little bit about that period of time, but now a lot, like many people didn't know. Because just like with Howard, Waking Sleeping Beauty, you watch it, you see scenes and stuff. It's like, oh my God, I didn't know that. And news interviews and clips and behind the scenes party, y'all had the thank you speeches throughout the movie. It's showing a very interesting time, and I didn't even know that was a movie you and Peter was trying to work on for a long time.
Yeah, we it's funny, it's kind of our history, and it may seem unusual to like make a movie about yourself, but and it is, but I guess we figured that if we don't do it, nobody will, and that it was a really interesting time. That nobody went to see animated films. You couldn't drag people to see animated films. Maybe you would go see Fox and the Hound or something. They're not bad films, but they just weren't big box office films. And then at the end of that period, we were working on The Lion King, and that was a huge film. It still is. So like, what happened? What happened to take it from that time when there was nothing to the time when animated movies were making hundreds of millions of dollars? So that's why that story became interesting to tell, because there was it was like a sports story. We always say it was like baseball or football, that you had a bunch of people who formed a team and they had a winning season, and that's really what it felt like and kind of what the story is.
And we also have to thank Randy Cartwright for all those behind the scene clips that he had.
That's really true.
Yeah.
And he's amazing. He filmed a lot of the material in both movies, Howard and Waking Sleeping Beauty, and it was illegal to film at the studio, so he was just doing it anyway, which is funny. But he has the greatest behind the scenes stuff. I wish you could see it all, because there's really like an hour of it, just him walking around, and he walks in on Tim Burton, and he walks in on Glenn Keane, and he walks in on John Lasseter, and the studio then was full of a bunch of kids from Cal Arts and different places, and I was lucky enough to be there. At that time, I wasn't from Cal Arts. I was a music major in college, so I come from more of a musical background. But we were lucky. We were young kids working in a studio where most of the people were 60 years old, and had been working for Walt Disney. And it was just a change of generations.
I gotta say, I kind of stole Randy's idea, Smudge, because when that came out, like I said, when Wicked Sweet Beauty came out, I just came from high school and I went into college, and that was when I started kind of rediscovering myself in terms of, 'cause I took classes in construction. I didn't like that, and for years I was always coming up with ideas in writing. And when I took up my photography studio class, I kind of took Randy's idea a little bit. I took my little camera, and when my teacher would give a lesson on a camera shot, I would film it, and I would film some of the people setting up shots and everything. And I remember talking with somebody recently, because I was like back in 2012, 2011, and I was talking with somebody. I went through an old flash drive, and I was like, I got all these clips I forgot about from back then. Randy Cartwright gave me the same idea.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And it's good that you picked up on that, because it's really a fun way to make movies. That kind of cinema verite, where you're like a fly on the wall watching something happen. It's kind of voyeuristic, but anyway, I really like that, and Randy's such a good guy, and we're lucky he filmed all the stuff he filmed.
Yeah.
You should talk to him on your show.
Oh, I have. I
interviewed. Good.
I've had him, and about a few weeks ago, I had animator Nick. I can't get his last name right. Nick
Ranieri.
I had him. And do you remember a man that worked there named Steve Hewlett?
Yeah, absolutely.
I talked to him too. I've talked to a good couple of people, and I'm waiting to hear back from a few others as well. I'm definitely trying to find Glenn Keane. I really want to talk to him.
He has a movie coming out that he just finished for Netflix, and I'm sure that's why he's been busy the last year or more, because it's a feature, and it's due out in October, which is now. So maybe when that comes out, you'll be able to get him. But he's really an interesting guy.
Yeah, and George Scribner, I talked to him as well. Another Oliver and Company.
Oh, he's a good friend. Yeah, George is a great guy and a really good painter too.
Yeah. Donald, let's go back a bit though. I mean, where are you from, and when did you know exactly that you wanted to get in the business of filmmaking?
I was born in Chicago when I was pretty young. When I was a kid, like 3 or 4 years old, we moved out to Los Angeles. My dad's a pastor. So he was a preacher, and he got a church out in Los Angeles, and we moved out there. And it was, this was in the early 60s. So it was at a time in Los Angeles that was really optimistic. All the nasty things in the 60s hadn't happened yet. Like the war in Vietnam hadn't quite happened, and the Kennedy assassination hadn't happened. And, so it was a pretty optimistic time for a while. And I always loved Disney. I would go to Disneyland whenever we could. It was expensive because it was like $6 to go there, which is ridiculous because it's like $106 now. But we went there, and I just couldn't get enough. I love Disney. I love Disney's movies. I went and saw every animated movie. The first animation I saw was like Jungle Book and 101 Dalmatians. I love those movies. And so those would be like, you seeing Beauty and the Beast or Aladdin or something. You have an imprint on your head. So I went to school just in Southern California here at a community college and majored in music. And I never had strong goals in terms of wanting to be an animator or wanting to be a producer or anything. In fact, I was going to be a music teacher, and I was going to be a music performer, meaning performing like orchestras, playing percussion, drums, timpani, that kind of thing. Right. And I got a summer job at the studio, at Disney Studio, and I just fell in love with it. I just thought, this is great. And I ended up staying for decades. And my job was really at the bottom. You know, I would get coffee for people. I would deliver things. I wasn't anything special. And, you know, I just tried to work as hard as I could and show up on time, and slowly moved up. But that became my university. You know, working at Disney, I learned so much from the people that were there. And so some of the names that you might be familiar with, like Frank Thomas or Ollie Johnston or Ken Anderson, or these veteran artists at Disney, were my teachers, and they were generous with that. And it's one of the reasons I like to talk now to younger artists too, because people were so generous with me when I was coming up, and there's no reason why I can't and shouldn't pass that on also. So
Right.
so I just went to Disney, and I found out that I wasn't going to be a great animator. I got more into production and producing because I love the variety. I love being able to work on the artwork, but also work with artists who I admired, and with musicians, and with storytellers, and with, you know, all these different departments. And that variety works with me really well because I'm a little attention deficit probably. So to be able to work with all those areas was interesting, and it was really good for me. And that's how I started. The first movie I kind of produced or worked on as a producer, associate producer, was Who Framed Roger Rabbit back in 1988. And then after that, Beauty and the Beast, and many others. So it was a little hard work, a little luck, and being in the right place at the right time, but trying to learn as much as I could from the people I was with.
A random question for you, since you worked on Roger. How did somebody like Roger get somebody like Jessica Rabbit? I mean, come on, man. Somebody as wacky as Roger was, and he got somebody with Jessica.
She says it in the movie. She says, because he makes me laugh. So I think that's the answer.
Yeah, that's I was a fan of Who Framed Roger Rabbit because next to Mary Poppins, I thought that was a really good movie where y'all did live action with animation, and that was like an up to live action with animation film that y'all did prior to Mary Poppins and Bedknobs and Broomsticks and Pete's Dragon. That was a good movie. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big breakthrough in some new techniques and things. So, and now, you know, it's been 30 years since those movies. Now every movie is live action animation combination. If you go see the Avengers or, you know, any movie, there's full of animation now.
Yeah. For you, I mean, I don't know if you embraced it at that time, but like, how did that feel when you was at the studio at that time? You was working with the Nine Old Men and Ken Anderson and people who had worked with.
Well, I think we really respected who they were and what they were doing, but we also knew that they were going to retire soon, and a lot of them did. And so there was this feeling like we had to, at some point, we had to step up, and we, meaning our generation of men and women, in our 20s and 30s, we had to make the movies. And it took, you know, a long time. It takes a long time to train an animator. And people like Nick Lanieri or Don Pomeroy or some of the people that you've talked to, it just takes a long time. So, but I think we really respected that and learned a lot from those guys and girls. And we had classes even at a certain point. We would have life drawing classes. We would have lectures. We would bring people in from the outside to lecture, to talk about color or music or sound. And that training program was something that I ran for a while, and I put together for a while. And it was really good because that was a good foundation for everybody to have those basic skills in animation.
Right. And, you know, one thing that I admired as a kid was watching Frank and Ali talk all the time. And in a lot of ways, it was like watching Blue and Mowgli, Blue and Bagheera, Woody and Buzz, like that buddy friendship that they had. And I always enjoy hearing what they had to say from not just from that time, but animating the characters. And I also love watching Eric Larson when he was talking about working on Bambi as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it just shows how much the personality of the animator goes into the character, and the character starts to feel like the animator, you know. And those were great guys. There's some of them weren't as outgoing as others. There's people like John Lounsbury and who was a little more quiet, but he was brilliant, really brilliant. So much talent there at the same time, and those were our teachers.
Yeah, I think the only 9 Men I don't know too much about, I know he worked a lot during Walt's era, was Les Clark. He's the only one I don't know too much about him.
Yeah, he was more early Mickey Mouse, and animated a lot of Mickey Mouse in Fantasia, The Sorcerer's Apprentice. And he is the one that's a little harder to grasp. And later in his career, he became a director. So he became, directed some television episodes and some shorts for Walt. But stayed there a long, long time. All those people stayed there for 30 years, 40 years in some cases, and really contributed a lot. And some of them, like Mark Davis, ended up going to Imagineering and designed rides for Disneyland, so they really contributed a lot on a number of different places.
Right. So when you was at Disney at the time, I know it was during the time after Walt had passed and his brother Roy had passed and Ron Miller was running the studio. And for you, I mean, I know you mentioned it in the movie, but for anybody who may not have seen it, how did it feel for you when the change came when he left and Michael, Frank, and Jeffrey, when they all came in? How did that transition feel for you during that period of time?
Well, for your listeners who may not have seen it, there was a time in the middle 80s in 1984 when there was there was a corporate takeover attempt when somebody tried to come in and buy Disney and split it up and sell off the theme parks and to someone and sell off the movies to someone else. And Roy E. Disney, who's Roy Sr.'s son, just thought that was not a good idea and that he needed to keep the company together. So he kind of defended the company and brought in Michael Eisner. And that was a tough transition. And I was not a senior executive or anyone really during that time. But I remember being in the ranks and it was, you didn't know if you would have a job the next day or if the company would be there the next day. You didn't know if the animation department would be sold off and closed down. You just thought, well, this could be the end of it all. But all you can do is just show up to work and, keep doing your job. And that's what we tried to do. And it became the opposite, actually. It became a really dynamic and kind of exciting time because all the new guys wanted to do, Michael Eisner, Frank Wells, Jeffrey Katzenberg, was to create a growing dynamic company. And so they were happy to make more movies. They were happy to make animation. They were happy to expand the theme parks and open up theme parks in Paris and Hong Kong. And, so they were all about growth and creativity and storytelling. It wasn't easy. It was a very honest culture. In other words, you told people what you thought, and sometimes what you thought was the truth about, maybe a story wasn't working or a character design didn't look great. And, so people spoke their mind. But that's what you want. Sometimes that's painful, but that's kind of what you wanted. And that's what made the movies as good as they were, because everybody spoke the truth.
Right. Yeah, and from an outsider like myself, it looked. I mean, I know you guys worked hard, and it was a lot of transitioning, but it did look like a fun period of time. And I'm sure having two people, or people like Michael, who came from Paramount, which Jeffrey did as well, and Frank, who came from Warner Brothers, they both coming in to take over, and then Peter Snyder came later. It was like, I guess people was wondering where Disney was going to go at that point, but it benefited because the films y'all did later, Great Mouse Detective, Oliver, Roger, Mermaid, Beauty, they all benefited and it came well, and it might not have happened without those guys coming on board and what they knew.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think the films got better, and there was some kind of aggressive leadership there, and that's really helped a lot. That supplied money, that supplied energy, that supplied deadlines, and the things that we all need to get things done. So it was difficult on one hand, but it was a good time. And I have so many friends and really good close friends from that time. It feels like people you'd been through the war with. People like George Scribner or Nick Ranieri, and I think I hired those people originally, but now they're great friends, and I admire them so much. And so you make lifelong friends out of those difficult times.
Yeah. What's interesting too is that I didn't notice until I saw the movie. I'm a huge fan of the Rescuers, and I
Yeah.
love the Rescuers under. I used to have like a little Bernard Bianca little toy, and that's like one of the few movies my mother could sit there and watch and be like, "Oh, Miss Bianca," because she knew Ava Gabor and Bernard Fox.
Yeah.
What what I didn't know was when y'all did the sequel that it didn't do well from what I understood. Y'all had mentioned that Jeffrey had pulled the ads, and I didn't know that because I thought it was a good sequel, and plus it showed
It
that
was.
Bernard was Bianca, and I thought it was a good movie.
It is a good movie, but sometimes movies don't hit. Even looking back, like Fantasia wasn't a big hit, Pinocchio wasn't a big hit. A lot of the Walt Disney movies weren't. But Rescuers Down Under, for some reason, didn't hit with the audience. It's full of amazing work. There's such great animation in that movie, and it's the first digital movie in Hollywood too, which people forget. But that was done on our CAPS system, which is like a computer animation system, and entirely digitally. So it was painted digitally and everything. So it's a real landmark film, and that happens. That like there's a huge following for Atlantis right now, and I can't figure it out because when Atlantis came out, it wasn't necessarily a hugely popular movie. But now there's a new generation that hasn't seen it. Disney Plus is out there, so you can watch Atlantis 5 times a day. And I think a new generation is learning to appreciate it, and that's great. That's a great feeling.
Yeah, yeah. I actually I recently re-seen Atlantis because when I was younger I liked it, and of course I knew Michael J. Fox, the voice of the main character on there. But I guess because I was young, I didn't understand it. But I rewatched it recently on Plus, and I love it. Thought it was a good
Mm-hmm.
movie, and I also love what y'all did with the Emperor's New Groove. That was my favorite. That's one of my favorite movie from that era of time. How did that come about when y'all did Emperor's New Groove?
It was a idea that Roger Allers came up with. Roger, the director of Lion King, and he was a great story artist the head of story on Beauty and the Beast, and a really amazing story artist. And he wanted to do something that was based in South America, and found some wonderful stories in the Inca culture in Peru. I think his idea for the movie was a little more serious. And eventually it changed, and eventually Roger fell out of the movie, and a guy named Mark Bindle came into the movie. And Mark is a really inventive, funny director. And David Spade came into the movie, and it turned into a comedy. And Eartha Kitt came into the movie, and Patrick Warburton. So the voice cast was just brilliant. And it turned into an opportunity to do something that was really funny, that had a big heart to it. Because the story about Pacha and his family is actually a very heartwarming story, but the movie itself is just a ridiculous comedy, and people just love it. And again, that was not that popular when it came out, but it's almost a cult movie now when you say Emperor's New Groove.
Yeah, I got a friend who whenever we link up and we talk about that movie, the first thing he'll do is I kid you not, he always references the scene where they're getting ready to go over the waterfall, and he goes, "Shall I rise to the bottom? Most likely. Bring it on." Booyah! He always references that scene all the time. So
But that, the writing in that movie was great, and Spade was great, and there's like an understated comedy in the movie that's just so funny. It's like, Eartha Kitt saying, "Pull the lever, Kronk, wrong lever," just silly, stupid stuff like that. And I can still watch it. 20 years ago, it came out 20 years ago, and I just think that it was a great movie.
Yeah, and that was also quite an interesting because y'all always had like the male villains. Y'all had a woman villain in this,
Yeah.
and the fact that the I gotta say, the ugliest y'all made her was the scene when she was asleep and she had them little cucumbers on her eyes. He was like, "This had better be good." I was like, "Oh my gosh."
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty
Yeah,
good. It's great
yeah.
animators. Some
Um.
amazing, funny animators.
So, I'm trying to find the right words for this. So, you did talk about this a bit in Wake and Sleeping Beauty, but I wanted to ask you. I've asked some of the others who I've talked to as well. Did you feel kind of a shift change to the company in a way when Jeffrey left?
Yeah, I think that's inevitable because we saw him every week, and he was a force of energy. And he and Roy Disney were our bosses, for lack of a better word. And the it's not that the movies necessarily got better or worse. I just think you miss a person like that because that's the person who's giving you your energy in a funny way. And we were, just working closely with him. So yeah, you do miss somebody like that. The same with Roy, though. Roy eventually kind of drifted away, and he and Michael Eisner began to run into conflict, and so the further Roy went away, we started to miss him too.
Right.
So it's inevitable when you're working with somebody that's that dynamic and has that much energy, that you would miss somebody like that. And
Yeah.
it's again, it's not that the movies would have been better or worse. I could argue it both ways, but a lot of things were
Right.
happening. Jeffrey left, Pixar was taking off and starting to make some good movies because Pixar was very much grew out of Disney animation, and we helped them get going and get up and running, and they were now starting to have their own momentum. And so a lot of
Right.
those things were happening. Computer graphics were everywhere, and it was just a big change in the industry.
You know what's interesting though with Jeffrey though, when he went and did DreamWorks and their movie Ants came out, for some reason I thought that was a Bug's Life too, because that was
Yeah,
the same Bug's Life that came out as well, and I think Bug's Life first before
yeah.
Ants.
There was a time when DreamWorks was just making everything that Disney was making. So, Pixar would do Finding Nemo, and DreamWorks would do, was it Shark Tale, or it
Shark
was
Tale.
like a, yes, and Bugs Life and Ants, and these movies would just be so similar, and that wasn't good for anybody, really. Um, Eventually, DreamWorks, Shrek is what saved DreamWorks because it was never that successful until Shrek came along. And then
Right.
it was a big enough film to have it last for another decade.
Um, what is your memories of I mean, I know you talked about it in the movie too, but what is your memories of Frank Wells? I know that was really tragic when he passed away.
Well, I didn't know him well. He was well respected. He was well respected as almost as an intellectual. He was really interesting, an explorer, climbing mountains, um, a Rhodes Scholar, was somebody who lived a bigger than life life. He would, as a student, he would rent a plane and fly around Africa. He would, just had those big events in his life that none of us, we seldom have. And I admire that. Everybody did. And to have him decide he was going to go climb the 7 summits on the 7 continents, which he almost did. He climbed all of them except for Mount Everest. So he's just that kind of spirit, and he was a great good leader. He wasn't always at the
Right.
forefront of things, but he was a really good companion to Michael Eisner. Michael, who was more playful, more creative, perhaps, but Frank was creative himself. So it was a good pairing. It was a really good pair. Really smart guy, and I think when he sadly passed away in a ski helicopter accident, you lost a very key person in a company, and that has its effect. And it had probably a bigger effect than any of us thought at the
Right.
time.
Yeah, and as a kid, because when Lion King came out on video, y'all had the tribute to Frank Wells on
Yeah,
at the beginning of the credits. I didn't know who he was at the time. I just said, okay, I thought he was just an animator or a long time person who worked at Disney.
Yeah,
So it wasn't the movie came out when I discovered who he was, and yeah, he seemed like a very interesting sharp business wise kind of person. Yeah.
he was very smart, very strategic. Um, yeah, and he was, he was just a smart cookie, well established in the industry, well respected by everybody.
Yeah. And what I also loved too was how you pointed out there was two versions of Beauty and the Beast. I didn't know that because
Hmm.
the English version of how it was to be, and then Jeffrey kind of said, "Well, no, that's not going to work," and that's when y'all had Alan and Howard come back in on that
Yeah,
period.
that happens on almost every movie. It's funny. It's very hard to start from blank. I mean, maybe you've experienced this on things you've made, because I do all the time, whether it's a big or small project. When you first start out with a blank piece of paper or with a blank, camera, the first things you put down are pretty junky and don't always work. And that's the case with all of us. And it was the case with Beauty and the Beast. It wasn't junky at all. It was beautifully done, but it was very serious and very much of almost like a European version of it. Director Richard Purdom is a brilliant guy, really good director, and but he saw Beauty and the Beast as a more serious story. And at the same time, he was working on it. Little Mermaid came out, and Little Mermaid was fun. Little Mermaid was a comedy. Little Mermaid had songs, and Beauty and the Beast wasn't that fun and didn't have songs. So I think the pressure was really to start to move in the direction of having more entertainment, and that's where the Clock, Teapot, and Candelabra came from, and more songs, which we were lucky that Howard and Alan were available. And so that was just a little bit of good luck, and that the movie fell apart in time to get Howard and Alan and a new group of directors on the film to make it what it is. And so it's some of it's luck, some of it's planning, some of it's strategy, and a lot of it's just difficult beginnings. And that's life.
Yeah, and it's ironic too that the journey that y'all took Beast on, because he was a character who just, he was a human, but he became a beast. And then Belle was somebody who wanted more, who was looking for more, and they were totally different. They were opposites.
Yeah.
And you had Gaston, who the antagonist, who wants her. And I pointed out before in an interview before that I think he was the main character y'all had with a ponytail at that time, because I don't think I had a Disney character with a ponytail, but Gaston.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's interesting that y'all had all that, but then things turn around and Belle and Beast falls in love with each other, and then he turns back into a human after he's stabbed by Gaston, who's like, "Let's kill the beast, let's kill the beast."
Mm-hmm.
But that story to me as a kid, I honestly loved it, and I love too how y'all had Celine Dion and People Bryson sang the theme of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was nobody really knew who Celine Dion was then. She had done one album with David Foster, I think, but she wasn't well known here. She was known in Canada, and so we were lucky to get her, and it was a good break for her. It was kind of her first big hit, was that song. But we put her with People Bryson because everybody knew who People Bryson was. He was like a big singer, and now everybody knows who Celine Dion is. So yeah, movies are funny that way. You just try to put the pieces together, and it's like putting a puzzle together. Sometimes the pieces don't fit, and you can't force it. You have to say, okay, this song doesn't work, let's try a new song, and this actor doesn't work, and this story point doesn't work, let's try a new thing. And you're constantly trying new combinations to make a film work, and that's what I like. I mean, it's fun to do that because it's the creative part of the process. It's not like you write a script and then it just happens. You write a script and then it's very clumsy to go from a written word to a spoken word, and it's clumsy to make things animate, and so you make a lot of mistakes along the way. And I think that's okay. That's kind of what movie making is. Even documentaries are, they're clumsy to make, and you make a lot of mistakes. But I don't even think of them as mistakes. They're just, you try something, it doesn't work. You try something else, it doesn't work. Those aren't mistakes. That's just your process.
right. And yeah, I honestly just like you, I understand how the process is to do like a documentary. I had my laptop here. I've had it since college back in 2012, and it's always that habit where you're editing a scene, and it freezes, but you forget to save. So it's like, oh my gosh, I mean that was my college learning. I had to learn that you gotta save as you go, because if you don't save and it freezes or something happens, you gotta
Yeah,
start over. Yeah.
I know it happens to all of us, and it's the worst.
Um, what kind of music do you like, Don?
Wow, I listen to a lot of jazz, kind of jazz from oh the going back to Charlie Parker um, and also Dave Brubeck and jazz from the 50s or 60s. I listen to a lot of classical music, um, and that's about it. I'm. It's not that I dislike anything. I listen to a lot of variety of things. Um,
Right.
but if left by myself, I'll listen to just some great jazz from the 50s or so.
Right. And I gotta tell you, when I first saw who you were when I was a kid, I thought you was the twin from the guy from Home Improvement, Richard.
Oh, how
Um,
funny! Yeah,
because you both had the beard and the
yeah,
hair, and you both y'all looked alike a little bit.
that's so funny. Yeah, we do. He's a good guy. It's funny. Our daughters went to preschool together, so I know of him a little bit.
Yeah. I know you didn't work on the Latin, but do you remember what it was like with Robin Williams being at the studio at that time?
Yeah, I did not work on that, but John Musker and Ron Clements, the directors on that, they did a really clever thing. They when Robin came in, they had him read the lines the way they were written, but then they had a box of props, and the props were like a sword and a hammer and a chicken and just a bunch of stuff, and
Right.
he could improvise, and so he would do the scene the way it was written, but then he would do 10 or 20 different takes that were just different and fun. And so much of that Genie character came out of Robin Williams' improvisation. And I think
Right.
they were really clever to do that, because that's what made that character so interesting, is the speed and the humor that he had and the quick changes that he had. And that all came from Robin. Yeah, and Eric
Right.
Goldberg, of course, the animator, was brilliant too.
Yeah. Forgive me for the camera movement. My phone was dying, so I had to put my charger in the hole. So I'm moving
Oh,
my
I'm
phone
sorry.
out
No
of the way.
worries at all. No worries.
So again, you guys did such like I tell everybody, thank you for what you did on all those movies, and because without y'all and what y'all did, I mean, y'all generation was the next generation from Walt's time. I mean, those movies would not have been the same. And what you guys done for my generation, who's from the '90s and the '80s, it who knew? Y'all really did
Right.
something that changed the world quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. It's humbling to hear that. And now it's up to you guys to do something great. So, and I'm sure you will. That's the thing. You've got um, great opportunities. Like the fact that we can sit here and talk like this is a miracle. The fact that we all have, cell phones with cameras, that you can make a movie with your camera on your phone and write the score on your laptop. It's amazing. Um, so there's so much great work, and a lot of the great work I see is on YouTube, on Vimeo, or on places that you don't often see. So
Right.
we were lucky. We're still making films, which is great. But I think what's exciting for me is to start seeing some really interesting work coming out of your generation and some younger filmmakers. And that's a good feeling. I want to try to help those people as much as I can, because you want to see that generation push the medium of animation further. And we tried to push it as far as we could. Now it's time for a
Right.
new bunch of people to push it as far as they can, and that's what's exciting about life.
You're right. Exactly. Yeah. And, my generation, it's interesting. I was talking with somebody the other day who actually was not aware of videotapes. because I told them Disney had
Oh,
videotaped the Disney classics and the Walt Disney Masterpiece Collection, because I remembered
yeah.
all that. Yeah, and it's it took off. And
Well, it did.
um there was I was going to ask you this in Wake and Sleep in Beauty, and you put like a glimpse of it in Howard's documentary. There's a scene you have with I think you called it the Aladdin story meeting, is when Jeffrey was talking with the animators and Roy Disney
Yeah,
is there.
yeah.
How did you find that clip? Because I've always was curious about whenever it would come up on previews. I always was curious to where that came.
I use it a lot. Sometimes when you're making documentaries, you have to use whatever you have. So if you've noticed exactly what I did, which was use the same clip for both movies. It was a meeting about character design, and it was designing the Aladdin character. And it was just some of those meetings back then. We would bring a film crew in just to document it, so that when the movie was over, we'd have it for press, or we'd have it for the home video release, like bonus material. So it's pretty common for us to bring a film crew in to film just to have it, and that's what that was. That was just a piece of film. That we had a meeting one day, and we brought in a videographer to film it, and it was just a meeting with a lot of animators, and Jeffrey and Roy was there, and Peter, and so it was a room full of people. It's kind of an interesting meeting. But it's the only thing I had on Aladdin, where there was a room full of people. It's the only thing I had. So every time I talked about Aladdin, whether it was like, oh, it was getting tough and we were, sacrificing our home life and our children, and I would go to that meeting, or so it was just the only thing I had.
Yeah, it is interesting how like in that clip, all the animators you could think of is in that room, and everybody is kind of joined together, and
Yeah,
it's and Jeffrey's talking to them. It kind of felt like he was your teacher and y'all were the students.
yeah. I mean, it does feel like that. And Jeffrey was around, and Roy too, for a while. But when Jeffrey was there, he was very articulate, and we would listen. It wasn't a time to sit there and tell everybody what you thought, because that was every other time during the week you could do that. Jeffrey was only there for an hour, let's say, and so you'd really want to shut
Mhm.
up and listen to what he had to say. Same with Roy. Roy was there a little bit more often, and Roy was quieter. Roy was very introverted, and Roy would express himself in written notes beautifully. He was a writer, and so you would get something written from Roy that would be really important.
Right. Um. So, were you a part of when y'all first did the early treatment of Lion King when George Scribner was involved?
No,
You were.
no, I was
Okay.
still on Beauty and the Beast, and the day Beauty and the Beast came out and the wrap party, the next day after the wrap party, they all went to Africa to do their research trip. So I was still back at home. Then when they got back, there were some story problems, and George left the movie, and that's when Rob and Roger and I started on the movie. Talk about tough beginnings. That was the same as Beauty and the Beast. It was just a really difficult beginning.
So I'm gonna turn my phone around. I got there's a clip I'm gonna show you. Ever since I was a kid, this was the most funniest, interesting scene to me with watching Lion King. I'm gonna show it right here. Let me see if I can do this.
Looks like the winds are changing. Change is good. Yeah, but it's not easy. I know what I have to do, but going back means I'll have to face my past. I've been running from it for so long. Ow! Jeez, what was that for? It doesn't matter. It's in the past.
I just wanted to know who came up with the funny gag for him to hit him in the head with the stick like that.
It probably came from a story meeting, and probably from the directors. And that was one of the last scenes we added to the movie, because when we first started previewing the movie with audiences, that
Mhm.
scene wasn't in the movie. So Simba saw his father in the clouds and then just ran off. And a lot of the audience didn't quite understand what was happening. I mean, you kind of
Mhm.
understood, but it wasn't that clear. And so we added that scene to make it really clear that it's basically Rafiki tells you what the movie's about.
Right.
Things happen and you can't dwell on them. It's your past. Your past is behind you. and then Simba can run off and save the Pride Land. So it was really just a chance to remind the audience what the movie's about. And James Baxter was the animator on Rafiki, so he may have come up with that idea also. To have him whack him on the head, but it's so wonderful, and just the whole animation of that scene and the dialogue and the voices and everything else. It ended up being one of my favorite scenes too.
Right. I get it was a lesson scene, but the idea that he actually went boom, and and then Simba references that later by saying, "Somebody hit me in the head, and I got the bump to prove it."
Yeah, you want to knock some sense into people sometimes.
Yeah. Did you know at the time how big Lion King would become to the point where it went on Broadway?
No, we used to. No, absolutely not. It was an animated movie about lions. How could that possibly go on Broadway? We used to joke about it. We used to say, "Oh, this will be there'll be a Lion King ice show, and there'll be lions skating and stuff." So no, we never thought of that. And it was actually really smart because there's a guy named Tom Schumacher who is the head of the theatrical division, and he had worked with Julie. Yeah, he had worked with Julie Taymor and on the Olympic Arts Committee for the Los Angeles Olympics, and so did Peter Schneider. And they brought in Julie to try to put a proposal together, and she just knocked it out of the park. It's really visual, beautiful way to tell the story. So no, we never thought of it.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I haven't seen the play yet. I've heard the songs to it, but I haven't seen the play yet. But I remember seeing it on the Lion King 2 preview on video when it first came out, and they introduced that. And Heather Hidley was in it. Yeah, that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I also like in Wake and Sleeping Beauty too that I didn't know of was y'all had the clip of the Golden Globes, and you were sitting way in the back. You weren't with the Disney crew. That was a long walk there that you did.
Well, it was because it's basically a hotel ballroom, and when they do the awards, there's a lot of tables in the way and waiters and celebrities and things. So they put all the celebrities, and I would do the same thing if I were doing the show. You put all the celebrities down front because they're the beautiful people, and they are the ones the audience wants to see. You don't put animators down front. So we were sitting like way in the back, kind of in the men's room, and but that didn't matter. It goes. So when we won, it was a surprise to begin with, and then to be able to like run down stage and get that award was a real treat.
Yeah, and you ran
it. It's somewhere on this shelf behind me. I have all my maquettes and my kind of Lion King sculptures and maquettes, and somewhere back there is the Golden Globe for Lion King.
Okay. And I'm sure it was a treat too, because in the event of, I saw you shake hands with Paige O'Hara when he was walking up. You got the award from Patrick Swayze, the man who just did Ghosted.
I agree. He's I was a big fan of his, and still am. And so to be able to, when you go into animation, you don't think you're going to live a life in Hollywood of celebrity or any of that. You go into it because you love it, and usually because you're a little more quiet than other people. Like I was never going to be an actor or anything. So it's really fun to go into those rooms and see Jack Nicholson or Elton John or something, and be able to be in the same room. And eventually, sometimes we got to work with those people, and they're by and large they're great. Most of those people are celebrities because they work really hard, and they tend to be well behaved. So yeah, it was good.
Yeah. Speaking of Elton, I actually, even today, when I'm making my deliveries in my truck, I got CDs, and on one of the CDs, I got Elton's version of "Can You Feel the Love Tonight." I love his version of it.
Yeah, isn't that nice?
Yeah,
he's amazing. He's not the first person that comes to mind when you think of great African composer, but he has a gift for melody that is amazing. And what then we did was put Hans Zimmer with him, and Hans could create a score that felt African, and then we brought in Lebo, who was from Africa and had a real amazing voice that we could put on the top of it to create that sense that you were actually there.
Yeah. a friend of mine who references Emperor. I mentioned him earlier. He loves The Lion King, and a few years ago we was watching it. I didn't realize at the time because I was younger. Y'all had Whoopi Goldberg as one of the hyenas and Cheech Marin.
Yeah.
I didn't know that
Yeah.
at the time.
Yep. Yeah, she's fun. She was great. The hyenas were meant to be just kind of scary, but they were comedic. So we had Cheech Marin and Whoopi, and it just became a chance to get some good comedians to help deliver those
Yeah,
characters.
it was kind of like the update Three Stooges. I had three hyenas and one who didn't.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, we just
Yeah.
wanted three silly, stupid henchmen to hang out with Scar, and that's where they came from.
Yeah. Y'all even referenced It's a Small World. Y'all had Zazu singing It's a Small World after all. And so I was like, no,
Yeah,
no, anything.
we had him sing a bunch of different songs to see like what would be the funniest, and that one always brought the audience just cracked up when we would sing that, because everybody knows that song, and if you go on that ride at Disneyland, it just gets in your head all day. So a lot of times you really try to work with the actors to improvise things. Lines like in Lion King, Timon says, "What do you want me to do? Dress and drag and do the hula?" That was improvised by the actor. So you just you try things, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
It's a shame that y'all didn't have any video players running when y'all was coming up with those line ideas. I would love to see any gags of how y'all was coming up with those lines for those guys in all those movies. I mean,
Yeah, I know. It's we always had a video camera on the actor because the animators used it to, actors will do funny things with their faces or gestures, and so that videotape would always be on the actor to do that. So there's great videotape of Nathan Lane or of Robin Williams, doing the voices. That's mainly for animators to study, but that's about it. No videotape on me, thankfully, or the directors.
Yeah. Do you think Disney would have been any different had Jeffrey had stayed and him and Michael and Roy had been able to work out any differences? Do you think Disney would have been any different then if he had stayed?
I mean, inevitably, yes, because, elements of any organization or any family, when you change them, things change a little bit. I don't know how it would have been different. And Jeffrey had some good success at DreamWorks. In the end, Disney turned out okay. Michael and Roy had their problems for a while, and then Bob Iger eventually stepped in. Bob's a really amazing character. He's a great executive. Very much about strategy and making good decisions, and very much about supporting creative ideas and storytelling. He's a real storyteller, a real fan of creative storytelling, and
Right.
so he's been really good for the company for the last many years. So who knows? It would have been different, yes, but you can't go back. You can't change your past, as Rafiki would say.
Right. And very rarely, I mean, I never say thank you for a funeral, but the clip y'all had of the memorial of Frank Wells in the movie, I never seen that, and I thought that was a touching part on y'all to include that.
Oh yeah, I had never seen that either, and I wasn't there that day. And when I saw it, I thought, this is, it's so sad, but it's something that points up there's a lot of conflict going on between Roy and Jeffrey and Michael. And that's what Waking Sleeping Beauty, that movie, is about. That it's about kind of the conflict and the inner workings of a studio. And so I had to put it in because it kind of showed that. But yeah, it's very bittersweet.
Yeah. How did Hunchback come about for you in 95, 96?
Well, it was an idea that came from one of our development people, David Stainton. Great piece of literature, book by Victor Hugo, well respected, and it's a little like Beauty and the Beast. You have a character who has a deformity or a curse, shall we say, and but a very complex, sophisticated story. So a lot of the problem on that was trying to edit it down so that it could be fit into a 90-minute movie. Again, Kirk Wise and Gary Trousdale, who I've worked with on a number of occasions, are really, really good storytellers, and they really test things, and they're funny, and uh, they're analytical, and they work hard to simplify things. Also worked with a studio in France. We had a small studio in France at the time, and so a lot of the animation for the opening of the film, where Quasimodo's mother's running through the street holding this baby, was all done in Paris, and the Hellfire song was all animated and storyboarded by the Brizzi brothers, the Paul and Gaetan Brizzi. So we had the benefit of having a French group of artists work on the film, and their work was incredible. So for a long time, we were worried about Hunchback, because I always thought the handicapped or disabled community is going to hate us, and the French are going to hate us. And it ended up being the opposite. The disabled community loved it, because now there's a hero in a story who has a disability and is shown as a very noble character. And the French loved it, because all of a sudden, you have this French piece of literature that's turned into a Disney movie. So you never know. And it ended up being, fairly successful, and it's a beautiful music score.
Yes, I love his song "Out There," "Living in the Sun." I love that song.
Yeah. And that's been to Broadway, and not literally Broadway in New York, but it's been on stage in Seattle and Berlin and in many, many places. And it's an amazing stage show to see that live on stage.
So did you at that time have a feeling, or like afterwards, did you have a feeling that eventually 2D was going to end and 3D was going to take over?
Yes, I didn't know how, but I think most of us felt that way. And I don't think we wanted it to be that way. I think a lot of us felt like, oh, they can exist side by side. But computer graphics are so seductive, and there's so much you can do with them to create dimension and effects. I think there's room for both, just like there's room for stop motion animation. And we see great hand-drawn animation. There's nothing like it. It's beautifully designed as a graphic medium. Just like when you see great stop motion animation, there's nothing like it.
Right.
So, and a little bit of it's generational. So I think hand-drawn animation never went away in some places. It's always been popular in Europe and in Japan. It just kind of went away in the studios, because the studios saw Pixar making so much money on their films that they thought, well, that's all we have to do is buy computers and we'll make money too. And they didn't really realize that the computers have nothing to do with it. It's the men and women who sit with the computers. And that's the difference that Pixar had.
Right. Now, at the time, I was a little disappointed about that idea happening, because I always saw, when it came to 3D, Pixar was known for that. And then DreamWorks went into that field, because you guys, I mean, at the time y'all did Dinosaur, and that was kind of like our first big 3D film at that time when I was growing up. And then y'all still had 2D. Y'all did Atlantis, Emperor, Lilo and Stitch, and a couple of others. And at the time I was a little disappointed, because I felt Disney was always 2D.
Yes.
But as time went by, it had to kind of, it's still there a little bit, because I still love 2D animation, but eventually I got it, that it is now part of the new system of things now, computer.
Yeah. And you'll see in Glenn Keane's new movie that he did for Netflix, there's it's a CG movie, but there's some beautiful hand-drawn animation in it also.
Yeah. I forgot to ask you, you also was a part of Fantasia 2000. How did you come to join that?
I don't know. I was asked to join it late in the game. They had all these sequences that they had been working on for years. And Roy asked me to look at how we could join them together. The original Fantasia back in 1940 had a host, Deems Taylor, that hosted the show. But I don't know that we wanted to do that, because there wasn't a singular host. So we ended up going to several different people, Steve Martin and Angela Lansbury, James Earl Jones, and asking them if they would host individual segments. So that's what we did, and it was fun. It was really fun because it was an easy day for these actors. It was just one day's work, and had to introduce the different segments.
Right.
And then we got a really great crew and filmed it all actually on the 20th Century Fox lot. We filmed a lot of it, and that was it.
I thought it was also cool that, and when y'all did Fantasia 2000, y'all included Mickey's scene in it from the original Fantasia.
Well, you have to, yeah, because that wasn't the original Fantasia, so you almost have to include that scene just out of tradition more than anything else.
Right. I guess I should ask this earlier. Did you by chance know Vance Gary or Larry Clements, the story department people?
I did. I knew both of them.
Okay. Yeah.
Why did you?
I was gonna say Vance Gary. I seen parts of a little bit when he talked about the Jungle Book, and Larry Clemens, of course, when he talked about it. But I thought those two were interesting storytellers, and no, I haven't really about them as much today. So I always ask people, like, did you know them or did you remember about them?
Yeah, well, Vance worked on Beauty and the Beast with us, so he was, right in the middle of it all. An amazing storyteller, and everybody looked up to him. But he was somewhat of a soft-spoken guy, and he had other interests too. He was into publishing his own books, and just a very thoughtful, funny, charming man. Larry was more outgoing, and he was a writer. He had written, I think, for television and for shows like Bing Crosby and that kind of thing. And he's somebody that worked in the Walt Disney days and was really, just a writer that was always in the room coming up with. I don't think he drew, but he was mainly coming up with lines and dialogue.
Right. It's interesting about that time. I mean, again, when the executive changed, who knew where Disney was going to go? Because y'all had films, but it wasn't until later on when y'all did Mermaid, Beauty, where it just y'all changed the dynamics. And I like Fox and the Hound. I love Rescuers and what came around that time? Robin Hood and Aristocats. They came around that period of time.
Yeah.
And ironically, I don't remember too much of the Black Culture, and I gotta see it. But people said it didn't do too well. Unfortunately, that was one of the films y'all did.
Yeah, it was a show that had a lot of good work in it, but again, it didn't quite come together. It was meant to be kind of an epic sword and sorcery tale, and it just didn't all hang together as a movie.
So what can we look forward to seeing you doing for the rest of the year going into 2021?
What a good question. I honestly don't know. I'm looking at a lot of different projects. I'm also doing some painting and writing, and a lot of times I'll just take some time to read the newspaper, look at articles, look for new ideas. I'm not doing a lot of animation anymore, and I'm mainly doing documentaries, which I love. So I'm looking at that. I'm looking at a few scripts that I might direct, and that's all. A good time to recharge and look at, just research some new stories.
Right. And this was my first question when you first joined in, because I asked everybody this. How have you and your family been doing during this pandemic?
Oh, thank you for asking. That's very nice, very kind. We're doing fine. Thank you. We're lucky. We're staying at home basically, like most of us are doing, and we're out in California where things are a little more calm and reasonable, and people are wearing masks and doing all the things that we should be doing. So we're doing good, and I hope the same for you.
Thank you. Ironically, I'm one of the people that been out here working when it happened, and so is my mother. My mother's a nurse, and she's out here working in this. Yeah,
that's tough. And so she must be exhausted.
Yeah, I mean, cause she's a home care provider, so even through this struggle, she's still out here, going out here, my mother, she had a real bad car accident last year, and she finally recovered later this year because it happened really bad. But where I'm going with this though is my mother is really somebody that never stops or quits. She always keeps it going. So even though this is going on, she says, I'm not going to sit down and quit. I'm going to go ahead and do what I gotta do and prayerfully hope for the best. And
Yeah, that's a really good attitude because you just, as long as you're cautious, you can't stop living. There's always been crazy stuff going on for millions of years, and you just have to plow ahead. But I'm glad to hear she's doing okay. That's good news.
And I'm glad to hear that you and your family are doing okay too.
Yeah, thank you.
I have 3 more questions for you before I let you go. The first one is, and you mentioned it in the making of Lion King. Um, I didn't know that y'all had an earthquake at that time. What do you remember about that
Yeah.
period?
Well, we did. If you remember, in Northridge in 1994, 93 or 94, there was a big Northridge earthquake, and it was devastating. It was the last big earthquake we had here, and it really shook, and the freeway overpasses came down, and a lot of the roads were closed. So we had to set up, much like right now, where people have to work at home because they just couldn't get in. They couldn't get on the roads. The studio itself was not damaged. A lot of things fell over, but the artwork and the storyboards and things weren't damaged. So we just had to set up a system where we could send artwork home, and we used the trains. We sent things home on trains to be able to, excuse me a second. Come on in. Come on in. Yeah, come on in. We used the trains to be able to send artwork back and forth so that people could do their work and their drawings and that kind of thing. And that became just a little challenge, like the last thing you need when you're trying to finish a movie. So, but it was a lot like now, like you just couldn't, you had to, deal with it. It's kind of what nature gave you. So.
Yeah, it's ironic too. Y'all making this movie and it's halfway through, and then that happened. You mean who would have thought it? And ironically,
Yeah.
it didn't happen. Ironically, it didn't happen so worse to a point where y'all had to shelve the whole movie or put it on hold because
Yeah, there was no choice. We couldn't do that, so we just had to keep going.
Right. My second question to you that I've asked other people from Disney too is, and I'm sure it's a hard question, but what is your favorite Disney movie?
That is hard. So thank you for that. I think Jungle Book probably is. I think it's there's just so much joy in that movie and fantasy and characters, and so I grew up with it, which is part of it. You always remember the movies of your childhood. So, but I always loved Jungle Book.
That's one of my favorites as well. I love the bare necessities. I always love to hear Richard Sherman, the composer. He always talked about, and I mean, and of course that was before Howard and Allen. Y'all had Robert and Richard Sherman there who made the music.
Who were equally as brilliant.
Yeah, I recently just watched their movie on Netflix, the story about them.
Yeah, it's great. It's a good documentary, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's ironic that was Walt's last movie that he worked on before he passed away too.
That
was ironic.
That's correct. Yeah.
And my last question to you is, looking back at everything you've done and your career, of course, I mean, how would you sum that up? I mean, did you know that your life would change like it did from when you was a boy to today?
No, you never do. You work hard and you hope. I was a kind of person who never had very clear goals. Some people can go to school and say, I want to be a dentist, and they just are a dentist for all their life. They want to play basketball or something. I was never that way. I was more open and curious to a lot of possibilities. And then I would just look at what came up. And so as the possibilities came up, I would kind of go in that direction. So I was very, and some people would advise against this, but I was very malleable or very directable by just the opportunities that came along. And I think that was a good thing for me. I did well with that, as opposed to having a firm idea that I wanted to be a producer or something. I ended up doing that, producing and directing films. And what I really am is a storyteller. And that's what we all really are, whether you're talking to animators or musicians or whatever. And so when I look back and think, well, I ended up now at the end of my career going, I'm really a storyteller, and I've worked with the best storytellers on the planet. I'm lucky because I got to work with them and still do. And the people are what make these movies. These aren't Don Hahn movies. These are movies that are made by wonderful, special groups of people, and they're the ones that I love and I love working with. So that's kind of what I feel most grateful about.
Right. Well, Don, I gotta tell you, thank you as a personal Disney fan. Thank you for your contribution to the films that came during that time. Thank you for what you did on Waking Sleeping Beauty. Again, I knew about that period, but I didn't know like eventually somebody would do a movie on that, and it benefited because it showed what it was like during that time, and the movies, the animators, Jeffrey, Michael, Frank. The scene where he smashes the pie in Frank's face. I thought that was funny on their part, because they're so business like they can have fun like that.
Yeah.
And
yeah, exactly. Well, that's great. It's so nice talking to you, and I'm glad you enjoyed those movies. And
yeah,
and I feel lucky to have worked on them.
And I really loved Howard's Story as well. That's a movie I could watch over and over again for some reason. It just touches Howard from beginning to the very end. And it's and a trivia to you as well. I was going to tell you because I'm here in Baltimore where Howard's from, and a friend of mine actually took me to where Howard's cemetery is, and I took a picture of his grave site, and it's right here with us. I didn't know he was buried here.
That's right.
Yeah, but
that's back in his hometown.
Yeah, and it's ironic, watching and hearing in his interviews and watching everybody talk about Howard. It really shows how to be a storyteller, how to do a movie, how to do plays, Broadway, and it was good. You should do Alan's story next.
I probably should someday. Yeah, he's still very busy working on a lot of projects. He's working right now with Lin-Manuel Miranda on Little Mermaid, so he's still busy.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Alan's, and I've often said if I ever get to New York and if something is playing there, I hope I can meet him there one day because I love Alan Menken and his style.
He's a great guy, very talented, very real, very genuine guy. So I think you'd like him a lot.
Yeah. Well, Don, thank you for coming on board my podcast today. I know.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. It's nice, really nice talking to you, Matt.
I know that everybody's schedule is tight these days, but I do thank you for coming aboard. And I would hopefully like to have you come back in December because that's my anniversary month, and I'm having a lot of people come back to talk some more with them. And I hope if you have some time in December, you could maybe come back for a short while.
Well, if I can, I will, because it's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I appreciate your questions and just nice having a conversation.
Thank you very much. I will, when December comes, I'll reach back out to you and hopefully we can talk again. I've had a lot of fun, and
great.
You made my day. You made my childhood, and you're making my day today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Say hi to your mom, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you, Don.
All right. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Okay. He signed off. Well, guys, thanks again for watching Pete Eastlick podcast. Forgive me if I look a little dark in the face. I'm charging my phone right now, but thanks again for watching. Thursday, I got a guy named Mike who in Baltimore with me. He's a book author and a musician, and I can't wait to have him come on board. And thanks for tuning in and watching. And I'm hoping I can get Don to come back because it made my day. It made my day. I'm always happy talking with anybody that worked at Disney during that time because they were like my heroes. But thanks again for watching. Until next time, have a good night now. Goodbye. God bless.